The following is a presentation of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. It's time for the Guillotine Grapevine, a podcast for the land of 10,000 wrestlers. 10,000 wrestlers. Now, here's your host, award-winning wrestling broadcast journalist, Jason Bryant.
Guillotine Grapevine here on location from the birthplace of wrestling, the birthplace of the Olympics, Athens, Greece, as we talk about the Cadet World Championships. Last time we talked with Andre Supron at the Junior World Championships. He was a World Olympic champion from Poland. Today we talk with Chad Shilson about his role here on Team USA and also his daughter Emily, who is representing Team USA at the Cadet World Championships. First of all, Chad, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Glad to be on.
So as we sit here in lunch, and this is the venue that the Olympics were held in 2004, when you think about that for a second, it's like, wait a minute, my daughter is wrestling in the same place, guys, that Cale Sanderson won Olympic medals. Is that in the back of the head at all as you head into this competition?
Absolutely. Yes, it is. We don't miss some of the big things that have happened before, I guess, our time here. And having an opportunity to compete in places like this, it's phenomenal. These are great opportunities. That's why we don't look past today, ever.
Talk a little bit about your background before we talk about Emily and her performances. And she's become pretty synonymous with success, not just at the women's level, but as wrestling as a whole. But your background in wrestling, what got you into it, and what ultimately led you to say, hey, I'll get my kids into this as well?
Well, I broke my leg my very first match of my life when I was 7 years old, and I thought, this is a great sport. I was in a cast up to my crotch for 6 weeks, and I couldn't wait to get back onto the mat. And so from that point on, it's been part of our family lineage. My brother and myself, we competed all the way through college, and my brother got hurt in college. I wrestled at Augsburg, and then since then I've won 15 veterans national titles, competed at Worlds a couple times, coached a ton of kids, and coached our kids as well.
Veterans. So this is one thing is when you get up to that level, some coaches are like, what are these guys still doing out there? What were you still doing out there? And just enjoying the life of a competitor? Yes.
When you're the main practice partner for your son and daughter, you still get the urge to compete. And being in a high school room all the time as well, you're wrestling with these kids and you think to yourself, I can still hit shots, I can hit my low singles, I can still tie up, I can hit guts. And so I wanted to compete, and I love it. It's a lot of fun. It's a ton of fun.
Is that kind of the pitch to get Coach Steiner to start competing at the veterans level again? He's looking over here with a smirk.
My goal for Terry is to get him and to do a marathon. I've taken the last year and a half off of wrestling competitively to amp up my running. I've run 107 marathons, and so my goal is to get Terry onto the roads where he's going to run a marathon. Not back on the mat right now. Not yet.
So this actually sets up, before we were talking about my failed attempt at the Twin Cities Marathon in 2013. My wife then my girlfriend had run Grandma's in 2012, so I felt like I had to step up, or actually probably 2008. She ran in 2009, whatever. Time's not important. I says, I failed miserably, so I said, I don't have the build of a runner, so just those of out there, let's hear your pitch about why anybody can run before we talk more about wrestling.
I'll tell you the exact reason why anyone can run. Same reason why anyone can or should wrestle. It's very simple. You just do it. You put one foot in front of the other from a marathon standpoint. Wrestling, if you've got a pulse, you can wrestle. And so same thing goes for marathon. It's all in your head. It really, really is. I have got so many people to run marathons that have told me first, just point blank, I'm never going to run a marathon. I think I'm up to like 3 dozen people that have told me that I've been able to convince to run a marathon. And some of those people, they're addicted to marathoning and running. So you'll have your time. Trust me.
I don't know. The first one, the thing is, I at least got one step further. I at least 1 signed up, 2 actually started the race, 3 actually ran the race, and 4 actually finished ahead of somebody who rolled their ankle on the first turn. So I wasn't dead last.
Oh, no, I get it. And we're going to have you and Terry running the same marathon with his gimpy knee and your gimpy excuse.
Overweight.
Yeah, well, Yeah, we're good with that. We're going to get you across the finish line. I can guarantee it.
Oh, okay. Let's hope my wife doesn't listen to this interview because, anyway, as we're circling back to wrestling, you drew the correlation there that anybody can wrestle. What was it about the sport? As you said, you break your leg at 7 and you're up into a cast. I mean, most kids these days, if that happened now, that's like the parents are flipping out. You're nowhere near that wrestling mat again. What was it about the situation that said, "Oh, this is cool. Go back out there and try it again"?
I think that it parallels with running. It's the harder you work, the more success you have the possibility of obtaining. I think that's a great combination. And so when I was sitting on the edge of the mat in my cast watching these other kids get their hands raised, I thought, this is a great sport. I want to be part of that. And you stick around long enough and you work your butt off enough, good things can happen.
There's also, in knowing people in the running community, Kyle Klingman from the Dan Gable Museum, he's done ultra marathons and things like that. He's a very wiry guy, loves running, and wrestlers are wired a little differently. Marathon runners seem to be wired a little differently. What are the similarities on how you've got to be wired to be able to excel at both sports?
Well, I can tell you, a lot of the times, you have to be willing to push yourself harder than someone else is willing to push you. And I've been the person to get up at 2:00 in the morning so I could get a 30-mile run in, and I do that before work. Well, how often do you see a wrestler going without food or water for a day and a half so that they can make weight just for the opportunity of competing, not for the exact science of winning, but it's for the opportunity, just the opportunity. And so there's this mentality that if you put in the time, whether it's running, whether it's wrestling, swimming, any of those lifetime sports, that it's on the individual. I think that it just pays dividends when you're all said and done. After the event or after the season, after the career, you can hang it up and look back and say, man, I really worked my butt off. It's very rewarding. And so and from a running standpoint and a wrestling standpoint, I tie those back together all the time. For me, they're very similar, very similar.
Is working into the coaching situation, and here with Emily, but also most people in Minnesota also know about the other Shilson. Pretty good credentials himself. Tyler now at the University of Wisconsin. When did you decide to get your oldest kid into wrestling, and then how quickly soon after did Emily follow?
This is a funny story. Tyler, in the beginning, wanted to wrestle all the time. He loved wrestling. And when it started getting a little more serious, he thought he'd throw a wrench into it and say, Dad, I want to play hockey. And so Margaret and I said, that's awesome, Tyler. You can play hockey. But just so you know, every weekend your mom and dad are going to be at wrestling tournaments. And so at that point he says, okay, I'll wrestle. And a good friend of ours, John Thorne, he always reminded us, he says, you want to get to the point where your kids are willing to drive themselves to practice. And we saw that early on, that Tyler and Emily, we never had to remind them about practice. They had their bags packed. They were ready to go. And so it was never us pushing them, which is, truthfully, it's really a good thing. And because I've seen the opposite from other families, and for us, it wasn't like that. And so they would pull us to practice. It's just something, we're lucky. We're lucky that happened for us.
You talked about, wrestling with your brothers, and, it's a sport. Terry's right here. He's got a twin brother that they grew up wrestling one another. Now, with the development and acceptance of women's wrestling, what did you see with your kids being brother, sister, that you thought was like, man, that's really different from what I had with just my brothers?
Well, truthfully, early on, it wasn't that different because Emily was accepted right away in our youth program, and I was the coach. And right away, we built up a group of girls. We had 13 girls in our youth program. We had 100 kids, but we had 13 girls. And so immediately, early on, Emily was accepted. And so it really wasn't, for us, we never saw the difference of boy versus girl or boy and girl and separate at practices or different. Emily competed against all the boys. She's had some of the best boy wrestlers in the country as practice partners all growing up. And so she's really never seen any different. And Tyler, he's always been her biggest advocate. He's helped coach her. He's worked out with her more than anyone else other than myself. And so we really never had a black and white, like there was some difference. They were just wrestlers. They weren't boy or girl. They were athletes. They were wrestlers. And a good friend of ours always reminds us about that. He goes, it's not that girls wrestle, it's not that boys wrestle, it's that athletes wrestle. And we have to remember that all these kids here, whether boys or girls, they're all athletes and they're competing. And so I think if people can get past the boy-girl thing, you're going to see another explosion in the numbers. The girls wrestling is going to explode.
As a father, what's it mean to see the work that groups like Wrestle Like a Girl have done to really, they got the first hurdle through to get NCAA emerging sports status. That's still a year away from meetings and getting that done. And now Emily's still at the point where she could probably benefit. I don't know if it's going to be happening by the time she even finishes college, but as a father who's sent a son to an NCAA wrestling institution, your daughter might have that opportunity and it be a sanctioned sport, or the kids behind her in the youth club, for example. What's this mean for you as a father that first stone started to get rolling?
Well, truthfully, it's huge and it's very important. You might not know this, I'm on the board of Wrestle Like a Girl, and so I'm one of those people that's behind the scenes pushing and polling and talking with schools, whether it's high schools or colleges, to continue to move this down the road. And what does it mean for the opportunity for Emily or the girls that are coming up behind her? It's huge. We are pushing to get Minnesota to sanction girls high school wrestling. There's 6 right now in the United States, and there are a lot of states that are really kind of thinking about it. They're processing the information, looking into what they need to do. There's still a fair amount of sales that has to go into it. We've got to sell some of the people that are still on the fence. Yeah, you said it, not me. And I can tell you this, that we're not going to try to convince the 10% of the population that are never going to change their mind. We just need to educate the other 90% that are going to be for it. Because, as I said, it's happening, and the numbers are growing. What you're going to see in a few years will make what we have right now look like nothing. It is really going to grow. There's so much beneath the surface that even the wrestling community doesn't see right now. It's really exciting. And so the parents of our younger generation, our girls, they don't know what it was like for Emily to go to a tournament and only have one girl there. Someone asked us this season, they go, well, how did Emily do when she wrestled down at Tulsa Girls? And we said, well, there was no Tulsa girls bracket when Emily wrestled there. This was only a few years ago. She wrestled with 60 other boys. And they couldn't believe it. They were like, really? Yeah. So a lot has happened in the last couple of years where these tournament organizations or other states are really pushing for girls brackets, girls tournaments. And so we're seeing it, and the attitude is changing. And truthfully, I think every second of every day, it gets better. It's that much.
In my short time in Minnesota, I've not exactly had the best relationship with the Minnesota State High School League, and noticed they're not exactly the most forward-thinking group. How do you try to combat maybe the thought that the only reason you're pushing for this is so your daughter can wrestle and win a state championship? Or are they looking at it as like, this is just some dads that want they want something. There's a bigger goal here. How do you explain that to people as stubborn as the Minnesota State High School League? For example,
I feel you, okay? I feel you, and that's all I can say on the air. But I have a great answer for that. I think changing the environment right now for Emily to have an opportunity to wrestle a bunch of girls at the high school level would hurt her wrestling. And so by me pushing for girls sanctioned high school wrestling would impact her wrestling negatively, because right now we don't have the competition for her. She grows by competing against the boys. And so I've said this point blank to anyone that says, well, you're doing it for Emily. No, I'm doing it in spite of Emily. It's for the other girls, because right now the competition for Emily in Minnesota, it wouldn't be enough. It just wouldn't be enough. Now for the younger girls that are in 2nd, 3rd grade, it could be, but not when you're a junior in high school. And so if they were to sanction it this year or next year and Emily had to wrestle girls high school, she'd do it, but it wouldn't be the best solution or situation for her.
Because when you're a women's wrestler right now, yes, some states that have the state championships, and some of them are folk style. I think the push is to make this freestyle, because you're here at the Cadet World Championships looking at world and Olympic aspirations and dreams. when you put that in perspective, what does the high school season actually mean for Emily in relation to what she's here doing?
Good question. She has high school goals, but those are not as, let's call it, grand as what her ultimate goals are. Winning world medals. That's ultimately what she wants. And she said it when she was 7 or 8 years old, when she first learned about what the Olympics was. And the high school is a place where she can get battle tested, get more matches against boys, because the boys are going to be strong. They're going to be mature. They're going to have, typically, they're going to, when you're making semifinals or finals of tournaments, they're going to have better technique. And so it's just something that she does because it's there in Minnesota. She's got some high school goals that still remain kind of unaccomplished. And if we were to take that all away, it wouldn't devastate her. She would just set her sights on these other goals and focus 100% of her time instead of 99% of her time. This past high school year, she made the state high school tournament and the second person in Minnesota to wrestle against the boys, first in AAA. But what people don't know is at practice, there were a lot of times where we wrestled freestyle at practice. And we did that because we always want to make sure that we're thinking freestyle. Folk style is great, but for her, the ultimate goal is to be the best freestyle wrestler in the world, not the best folk style wrestler in the state of Minnesota. That's not it. So it's a way for her to get good practice partners, but ultimately it's not what she really strives for or what drives her.
Allie Bernard is a two-time Olympian and a proud Minnesota native, and she's been active within the Minnesota USA wrestling community. And what's it mean to have a trailblazer like that from Minnesota? I mean, we have trailblazers, Clarissa's from Hawaii. I'm sure girls from Hawaii look up to her. But in Minnesota, with such a great wrestling culture, what did it mean for Allie to come through first and really, chop down a lot of trees, so to speak?
That's funny, because Allie was wrestling in 2008 and 2012, two-time Olympian, two-time junior world champion. Allie was wrestling at a time where girls wrestling, women's wrestling, female wrestling really still wasn't on the radar. And so there are a lot of people that don't or didn't know what Allie's credentials were. And in 2010, I started recruiting Allie to coach our girls program. And she was pretty adamant about continuing to make another run at the Olympics, and she was fortunate enough, things worked her way and got onto another Olympic team. And so having her being a part of Minnesota girls wrestling is huge. I've always said this about her, that she is so modest that you could talk with her for an hour if you just met her, and you'd leave that conversation, that meeting, and you'd never know that she was a two-time Olympian, because she'll never tell you. She is unbelievably modest, but she's also a sweetheart. She's super great with the girls. Girls love her. And so anytime, we always tell her, she's got a busy schedule, but anytime she can get to our practices or come along to a tournament and coach, we'll take her. She has an open invitation, but she is on our coaching staff for Minnesota, and we love it. Absolutely love it.
Where has been the biggest surprise of support for women's wrestling in the state of Minnesota? There is still some old guard that float around the state that may or may not be active. I haven't really run into anybody that's against it. But what was, when you really started making this push for women's wrestling and working with Wrestle Like a Girl and Emily's coming through the ranks, where was your biggest surprise on people, whether within the state of organization of Minnesota USA Wrestling or the state as a whole, that were like, oh wow, you're behind us?
I would say from an individual standpoint, we get a lot of moms and dads of competitors of Emily's, and over the years, and we never really knew how to take it, because we weren't sure. It's not as though they come right up to you after a match. If Emily wins and we go our separate ways, we weren't sure. But over the years, we've had so many parents come up to us and tell us that your daughter wrestled my son back in second grade or third grade or fourth grade, and we've been watching her ever since, and we've been rooting for her, and we're big fans of her. And so there's just been a lot of people around Minnesota, nothing specific, but just so many different areas of Minnesota that have been supportive. A lot of small towns really support Emily and support our girls wrestling. I get a lot of messages and a lot of positive feedback. And so that's why I say that it's really more just an educational process to continue to grow the sport in Minnesota versus trying to sway the thinking of the 10% that aren't going to change. We just need to educate the rest of them because there's a lot of support, a ton of support. And then the other piece is that we struggle with the MSHSL and the organization of trying to get them to see the benefits of what girls wrestling could do. Girls wrestling from an individual standpoint or from a team standpoint or from a school, from a global standpoint, it's what Wrestle Like a Girl is all about. And we need these state organizations that sanction the sports to understand that. And that again is part of that educational process. We're working on it. We are working on it. Every day I work on that.
Now, as we circle things back, and with school starting, as we record this day after Labor Day, Minnesota schools start there. You guys are at Centennial, but you live in Maple Grove. Opportunities that open the doors for you to wrestle at Centennial. This is something that how welcoming were they to you when you just said, "Hey, we want to go to school here"?
Well, I can tell you, the moment I told Coach Berglund before he retired, he had a couple seasons with us before he retired, and I said, 99% sure we're going to move and we're going to go to Centennial. And his response to me was, I'm smiling inside. And so they were very welcoming right away. It was a great opportunity for Tyler and Emily to be in an organization where they really want to excel. And we were at a program that it wasn't like that. It was the exact opposite. And we weren't going to allow our kids to be in a place like that they knew every day the goal wasn't to improve. The goal was just to exist. That wasn't for us. And John Thorne, again, another piece of advice that he had said, and this is something he's told me a lot. He says, one thing I told my wife Brenda, this is John Thorne saying this, one thing I told my wife Brenda is that I will never allow our kids to have a bad coach. And I took that to heart. And so I'm in the room. I'm an assistant coach. I love volunteering because that way I don't have to do the admin stuff. And so then I get to work on the technique and the higher level stuff. But I wasn't going to allow them to have anything less than what we feel was the best opportunity.
I'm at coaching here. I mean, you're sitting, a couple seats over from Terry Steiner. What have you learned on this trip that you're going to be able to take back to, coaching your high school kids or coaching the club kids or even coaching Emily that's like, that's opened your eyes to coaching? You seem to be a student of the sport, and coaches, they borrow, beg, and steal to learn about their own coaching situations. What have you learned on this trip so far?
There's several things, but one of them is preparation. Terry gave a talk to the team, to our girls team, before we started the first round. And I've listened to Terry talk at practices a lot. And yes, you know what? That's part of what I was going to say. Is that no? You have to listen. His delivery, he can get his point across without shouting, but he's very direct. And I once was accused of being rude, and I said, no, I'm just direct. And so I think Terry's got that same delivery. That he's not a jerk. He's just, no, I'm serious. He's what he does is that he just tells you like it is. He's coached long enough to not have to mince words, so he can get his point across pretty quickly. And so now Emma is a student of Terry Steiner, and Emma Randall is doing a great job. And so I pick up so much stuff from these two, and then Chun is learning from them as well. And so what a great opportunity for me to be able to sit back and just study what they're doing and how they're coaching. Terry just coached at the World Championships, and so now he's coaching the Senior World Championships, and now he's coaching at the Cadet World Championships, and we get to copy what he's doing, or we get to learn what he would have said in the situation where Helen Maroulis would have been going on the mat to win a world title. Sign me up. I want that all day long. I can tell you this. I always say this about anything in life. It doesn't happen by accident. And in other words, you get to the point of having success because you go out and try to accomplish something. And so they get a world champion, they get a silver medalist, they get a bronze medalist. Well, those things don't happen by accident. I've been to the senior camps. I see what they do. I see how hard they work. I see how they're coached. And juniors, they do well. Cadets, we're not done this week, so we're still competing, knock on wood. And so those things don't happen by accident. And it's a process that they've instilled in the girls and in the women, and you have to buy into that process. And I've bought into the process. And like I said, I get to sit back and watch, and then when I'm called upon, I get to do something. And I can guarantee it's going to be something similar to what they're doing, because I've been learning from them.
I want to dial it back. You mentioned Helen Maroulis just a moment ago. August 2016, Helen makes history. What were you and Emily doing when Helen won the gold?
Oh, we were watching, of course. We were watching and we were rooting. We were cheering. And
what was Emily's reaction when it happened, though?
Well, first of all, you got to know Emily. Emily has no reaction about anything. and I'm not joking. She has zero reaction to anything. And so that's normal for Emily. But it was incredible. It was incredible because what it did is it showed us that it can be done. You know, the door is wide open now. There's nothing holding these other athletes back from doing it. And so now all you have to do is you tell a girl, train hard, go out and win a world title. Now there's a lot that happens in between there. But Helen did it. Why not someone else? And we had one. You can never be the first again, but you could go and do it again. And so there's a lot of girls right now that they don't want to be the next Helen Maroulis, but they want to be the Vale Baker or the Emily Shilson or whomever else. And these girls are working just as hard. They're just younger.
What are some things that you've noticed internationally? Maybe, you've learned from the American coaches, but observing other teams in the warm-up area and seeing how they train. And, of course, you can't not pay attention to the Japanese and their regimented culture of excellence when it comes to women's wrestling. I mean, they're out there just blowing people away as it is right now as this cadet tournament has started. But internationally, what does an event like this give you in terms of being able to absorb how the rest of the world thinks? So, we as Americans are very, closed-minded in a lot of ways. Like we don't like the metric system. We drive on the right side of the road and, of those type of things.
I've got some thoughts there. I've been lucky enough to coach alongside and work with the Japanese team 3 or 4 times now in the last 2 years. And besides watching what they do at our camps, because they've come to the U.S. for a few different camps, and then watching their matches, I have studied the Japanese wrestlers a ton. I'm really a student of the sport. I watch a lot of film, but I break it frame by frame by frame. I break it down to find out what are they doing differently. And for starters, I can tell you, Japanese wrestlers, they stay in great position. And if you've ever heard a wrestling coach say one word more than anything else, it's position in a practice. Position, position, position. And the Japanese wrestlers, they've got that down to a T. And discipline, you have to have the discipline to stay in the position for the entire 4 minutes or the entire 6 minutes or the entire practice. And so we as the United States, I'm not concerned about what the other countries do because I'm USA. And so we as the United States, we have to continue to improve from that standpoint. We don't necessarily need to copy what Japan is doing. We just need to improve on what we're doing. And if we improve on what we're doing, then that'll take care of everything else. And one of those things will be continuing to impress upon our girls, staying in good position. Don't come out of position, no matter what. No matter what they do, we're not coming out of position. And you can ask Emily what I preach to her all the time. And she'll say, position, position. And she'll do it with a straight face, but that's what she'll say.
As we wrap up here on the Guillotine Grapevine, where it is, again, always a great time to be a Minnesota wrestling fan. Before we started, we were talking about the state fair a little bit. I went out on Monday after I got back from Paris, turn around, come here for Greece. So our beeline is to the food building for the cheese curds from Mousetrap, get the Pronto Pup, maybe get a beer flight. But, you were telling how painful it was for Emily to go to the state fair with making weight on the brain for this. I mean, so ideally, what's the perfect state fair trip, and what did you guys have to do this year as a change?
No, the perfect state fair trip is we come in to the Midway and we play the bottle game and we win our jumbo. We always do because I built that game 18 years ago so we could master it so the carnies would never take our money again. And then we purposely give the jumbo away to a little kid always because, why? We don't need it. We give it to someone right away. And then we head to the Prono Pups. And so we did that this year. And the only difference was that Emily didn't have a Prono Pup. And then we headed over to the footlongs, and Tyler and I had a footlong, and Emily didn't have anything again. Then we went to the food building. We walked around, saw a lot of people. Food building, nitro ice cream. Emily had nothing again. Was
developing a theme here, I noticed.
Well, we're getting to it. Then she popped in some double bubble, 4 or 5 or 6 pieces. And it wasn't until about 4.5 hours later that she says, okay, could I get a pretzel? And this is all on her. And so she had a pretzel. I do remember she did have one little sliver of watermelon as well. It was about 1/10 of an ounce. And she was with a training partner that flew up to be with her for the entire week from Florida. And so her training partner had the same thing. It was awesome. The training partner said, I've got your back. I'm going to have a pretzel. I'll have some gum, and I'll have a sliver of watermelon too. So Emily was in great spirits the whole night. It was awesome. She did miss out on some of the best food around, but we'll make it up to her. She's the one who gets to wrestle at Worlds, not me. So she's got it better than I do.
What do you tell the training partner? You have to fly her back up next year just to make sure she can actually have some of this stuff that she missed out on. Minnesota State Fair is like a bastion of delicious, greasy greatness.
Yeah, oh yeah, the Minnesota State Fair is legendary, and we kind of primed the pump for Catalina to come up here, and we told her that the State Fair is phenomenal, and we said there's awesome food which you probably won't be able to have, but there's great people watching. And so it was all right. It turned out great. It was a good week. It was awesome for her to be able to come up and devote a week to getting Emily better. We really appreciate that. Practice partners like that, they're worth their weight in gold.
Support wrestling in the land of 10,000 wrestlers by subscribing to The Guillotine. 9 issues a year for just $20, the best value in Minnesota wrestling. Subscribe at theguillotine.com/subscribe.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.